Corporation of New York City. This document was accepted by the New York City General Assembly on September 29, 2011. As we gather together in solidarity to express a feeling of mass injustice, we must not lose sight of what brought us together. We write so that all people who feel wronged by the corporate forces of the world can know that we are your allies. As one people, united, we acknowledge the reality that the future of the human race requires the cooperation of its members, that our system must protect our rights, and upon corruption of that system, it is up to the individuals to protect their own rights and those of their neighbors. That a democratic government derives its just power from the people, but corporations do not seek consent to extract wealth from the people and the earth, and that no true democracy is attainable when the process is determined by economic power. We come to you at a time when corporations, which place profit over people, self-interest over justice, and oppression over equality, run our governments. We have peaceably assembled here, as is our right, to let these facts be known. They have taken our houses through an illegal foreclosure process, despite not having the original mortgage. They have taken bailouts from taxpayers with immunity and continue to give executives exorbitant raises. They have perpetuated inequality and discrimination in the workplace based on age, the color of one's skin, sex, gender identity, and sexual orientation. They have poisoned the food supply through negligence and undermined the farming system through monopolization. They have profited off the torture, confinement, and cruel treatment of countless animals and actively hide these practices. They have continuously sought to strip employees of the right to negotiate for better pay and safer working conditions. They have held students hostage with tens of thousands of dollars of debt on education, which is itself a human right. They have consistently outsourced labor and used that outsourcing as leverage to cut workers' health care and pay. They have influenced the courts to achieve the same rights as people, with none of the culpability or responsibility. They have spent millions of dollars on legal teams that look for ways to get them out of contracts in regards to health insurance. They have sold our privacy as a commodity. They have used the military and police force to prevent freedom of press. They have deliberately declined to recall faulty products endangering lives in pursuit of profit. They determine economic policy. Despite the catastrophic failures their policies have produced and continue to produce. They have donated large sums of monies to politicians who are responsible for regulating them. They continue to block alternate forms of energy to keep us dependent on oil. They continue to block generic forms of medicine that could save people's lives or provide relief in order to protect investments that have already turned a substantial profit. They have purposely covered up oil spills, accidents, faulty bookkeeping, and inactive ingredients in pursuit of profit. They purposefully keep people misinformed and fearful through their control of the media. They have accepted private contracts to murder prisoners even when presented with serious doubts about their guilt. They have perpetuated colonialism at home and abroad. They have participated in the torture and murder of innocent civilians overseas. They continue to create weapons of mass destruction in order to receive government contracts. These grievances are not all-inclusive. To the people of the world, we, the New York City General Assembly, occupying Wall Street and Liberty Square, urge you to assert your power. Exercise your right to peaceably assemble, occupy public space, create a process to address the problems we face, and generate solutions accessible to everyone. To all communities that take action and form groups in the spirit of direct democracy, we offer support, documentation, and all of the resources at our disposal. Join us and make your voices be heard.
This is not the country I want. I don't want fossil fuels. I don't want pollution. I want a world that my daughter, who's around here somewhere, that my daughter can grow up in. You know how heartbreaking it is to have her look at me every couple of weeks and say, Mom, what's the future going to be like? Are we even going to have a country? Are we even going to have an environment? Are we going to have trees? Are we going to have, what's it going to be like? And I want to tell her it's going to be okay, and I kind of do. But I'm scared. The reality is I'm really, really scared. I don't know what it's going to be. But I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. Unless things like this, and unless people like us make it very clear that where we are is not where we want to be, and we want to make drastic changes to make it into what it is we want it to be. And we can do it. We can do it.
I know that everyone's heard a lot about what's going on at the county home, and what's going on down there is just kind of indicative of what we're seeing going on across this country. All of a sudden, people who have decent jobs and work hard are supposed to give that all up. They're supposed to work for less, they're supposed to work harder, they're supposed to get no benefits, they're supposed to get no health care because somebody wants to profit from their work more than they're profiting now. That's what that's all about. Sell it off. We used to be considered public employees. Before that, we were considered public servants. Now we're considered public enemy number one because we dared to sit to a table and bargain for what we considered was fair treatment. We dared to say we have rights as middle-class America to be treated decently. That's what this is about.
My name is Matt Furman. I'm the Vice President of Local CSCA 627. And Local 627 supports our movement. I just want to talk briefly here because I'm already late going back to work and I really don't care. Show of hands, how many of you know what the practice of fractional reserve lending is? Okay, not very many of you do. Fractional reserve lending is loaning out more money than you have on assets. Now, by law, companies are supposed to do that at a 9-to-1 ratio. However, companies like Goldman Sachs, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac are leveraged 333-to-1, 72-to-1, 52-to-1 JP Morgan Chases. That's why we have deficits and depressions, is because they're printing money we don't have. It's been the battle we fought since the American Revolution. Thomas Edison said if the United States can issue a bond, it can issue a dollar bill. So why isn't the government issuing its own money debt-free instead of borrowing from the private banking industry known as the Federal Reserve and the network cartel of the commercial banks? Article 1 of the Constitution says Congress has the power to print gold and silver and mint and issue bills of credit. So why are we not doing that? Because obviously the private sector has failed us. And we need to take back the money supply. It belongs to us, the people. Sovereign nation, sovereign people, sovereign money. Call your congressman and tell him to end the practice of fractional reserve lending and get this country back to prosperity where it belongs. We were talking the other day, John and I, about the bad mortgage securities that Goldman Sachs offered and Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers. And if you'll notice, Goldman Sachs was the only large commercial bank that didn't fail, because they were called in by the Bush administration and the government to solve the problem. They let Lehman Brothers fall, they let Bear Stearns fall, and they let Goldman Sachs get bailed out because they were working for the government with the government. And that's wrong. Because they have $79 trillion in bad mortgage assets and credit swaps. Money they don't have in the first place because they created it out of thin air. That is one of the first steps we need to take to get back to prosperity. That's the one reason we have boom and bust cycles and recessions and depressions, because they contract the money supply at their own will. And that's not good for us. And it needs to end. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your support. And please, get more people down here. We're here for another week, and rally the people.
This is kind of the reawakening of a very, very important ideal that I know a lot of the Greek philosophers saw as the ideal, and that is citizenship. You know, this is what makes change happen. There's nothing else that has ever caused change to happen on a grand scale. Look, the civil rights movement, look, the labor struggles. It's all because people came out, gathered in mass protests like this, assembled, and demanded change of their leaders. Because in the Constitution it says they derive their just powers to rule from the consent of the governed. And this is our revocation of that consent, saying that's not how we want it to be done.
I grew up in the south side of Syracuse. I came to Fredonia here. My sister went to school here. I love this place. I love this community. I'm 20 years old, a junior at Fredonia State College, and thousands of dollars in debt. I've never owned a credit card. I have a part-time job, but that's never going to help unless I am employed after school, after I graduate. And that's not even looking too good. So, you know, it's going to get better. I hope it gets better. You know, we all grew up on the American dream, just like everybody else. And the biggest message in that dream from my parents was go to college. Go to college and make something of yourself, because that's the only way you can in this world. Now I'm seeing that that isn't even the case. People graduate from college and they don't get jobs, and that's the reality. I felt this movement, I felt the economy, I guess, well, first when I was growing up, because, you know, I grew up in a small town with working class parents. They got divorced when I was 12, and my mom raised 4 of us kids single-handedly. Filing for bankruptcy wasn't a big deal to us because it had to happen. And my mom worked hard to work back up from where she was. She secured herself with a great job in my now stepdad's business, a small local business making windows and doors. Unfortunately, that business went under just this summer, and my mom and my stepdad both lost their jobs. Now we have my sister in graduate school, I'm in college, and both of my brothers are juniors and seniors in high school, with plans on going on with their education. How we'll ever pay that without taking out federal loans and grants? It's impossible. Yet we're putting ourselves in more and more debt, which will eventually lead to us putting our children in debt. I can't believe everything that goes on in this economy, and no help from the government, no help from the people who are the 1%, from the wealthy. They don't see the suffering, and it's time that ends. When I first started coming to school here as a freshman, I had a job back at my town at a hospital, and that's where I first felt the biggest part of loss of jobs and everything. That year, my dad lost his job at a steel mill, and I got laid off as an 18-year-old student from a hospital who was going under because of the economy. So it really does hit all of us, and I just hope that more and more people join in on this movement and really tell their stories and share what they have to say.
I am Kimberly Cole. I am an English professor at the college, but I'm also someone who trains teachers to go out and work in public schools. And one of the things I wanted to take just a couple minutes today to talk about is the corporate influence in schools and schooling. We're pretty much aware of how banks, for example, have entered into the housing market and led to a lot of foreclosures. But many of us have an assumption, I think, that our local schools are local and under our control and under the influence through the local school boards and local school taxes that we pay, and those are regulated by the state. But I wanted to highlight a couple of areas or ways that corporate influences do enter the public schools. Some of them really obvious, and so you can point at them and say, oh, look, there is, for example, there are often vending machines in schools where the corporations have paid the schools some money to get the Coke machine or the Pepsi machine or the milk machine or the candy machine in the schools. And you can look at that and say, oh, that's I can tell my children not to use or not give them money to do that. But there's a sort of branding that goes on in kids' minds when they see that stuff all around them. But again, that one's kind of easy. A second level, not so prevalent now, but was for a while, was a Channel 1 movement. I don't know if anybody had Channel 1 in their schools. Bob says yes. Where what happens is there's sort of corporate infomercials that get put together or news programs that get put together, and kids as a captive audience in schools are watching those. And those are kind of easy to point a finger at and say there's a corporate influence in the school. Another one that we've seen a lot of, and maybe even some of your children enjoy, are the sort of corporate entry into the curriculum, where maybe Crest does a dental hygiene unit and provides toothbrushes and toothpaste and some neat handouts for kids about how to keep their teeth clean. But, well, if keeping teeth are clean is the important thing, it doesn't have to be tied to Crest toothpaste or Colgate or whichever corporate sponsor you want to see that being. There was an example that I was looking at about Clearasil doing a unit on self-esteem in young women. If you don't know, Clearasil is an anti-acne medication, over-the-counter drug. It's like, what kind of image of self-esteem will they be promoting or selling? So those are the three kinds of things that you can look at and say, that's corporate influence in our schools, but we can identify it, we can see it, we can put our fingers on it, and so we can avoid it maybe, or we can teach our children not to pay attention to it. But there are some other things going on that are maybe a little more insidious, a little less obvious. One of the assistant commissioners for education in the state ed system, the K-12 system, is in fact a former CEO and founder of a charter school movement. And that's a place where I think we need to have our eyes and ears wide open in the days to come, because what happens is there's a conversation about teacher accountability and how schools are failing. We've all heard that. And what happens is it becomes a blame the teacher, we need teachers to be more accountable. And what's coming out of that right now is that in New York State, in the future, the annual yearly progress report card of teachers is going to, 20% of that, each teacher is going to have a report card that's going to be public information. Those teachers' report card score is going to be based in 20% of that is going to be based on their students' scores on standardized tests. Well, the standardized tests, and this is a place where we need to be really quite aware, those standardized tests are developed by, sold by, scored by, and monitored by corporate interests. There are, Pearson is a big one, McGraw-Hill has been. Those are the places. And then what they do is they'll sell you professional development units in case your kids aren't scoring well enough on the standardized tests. So what we start to see then is this kind of cycle of corporate influence and control, looking at the things that seem very objective and, oh, test scores. We all know that a test score is real and honest and true. Well, perhaps, but it's also coming along with a curriculum that has a set of ideologies behind it, and at the bottom there's a profit margin. And so that's one of the things that I think we want to keep our eyes open for and our ears listening to when they start to talk about accountability for teachers. And the last thing, some of you may be aware that in the last 2 years there was a Common Core initiative that came forward and looked like a grassroots movement to get across the United States a Common Core of this is what kids who graduate from high school need to be able to do and need to know. And that was, on the face of it, not a bad thing. You know, we're not opposed to accountability. But there's a really interesting YouTube video out, and some professors from and affiliated with a group called Opt Out, which is they're asking people to opt out of the standardized tests, traced, once again, the money trail, and looked at who was funding the Common Core initiative and how it got established. And it, on the face of it, again, it doesn't look so bad. You have foundations that are supporting that. But when you trace that back, the foundations have a lot of money coming out of corporate interests. Bill and Melinda Gates is one of their largest sponsors. The Broad Foundation is another. And so what we end up seeing is that on the face of it, standards, which look like a great thing, are being funded and supported by corporate interests and people who are very interested in privatizing schools, taking public out of schooling and making our children's education yet another commodity that can be bought and sold, like houses and the mortgages that come from that.
I'm a professor from Computer Science Department at the SUNY Fredonia. I have been in Fredonia the last 15 years. I am with the United University UUP Union the last 5 years, and I am an outreach committee member of the union. Just to say you, if the millionaire taxes are held and continue in this state, the saving will be $5 billion, which is enough to cover the deficit this state is facing. So,
say that again.
If the millionaire tax is kept going, we will be gaining $5 billion, which is exactly the amount of the deficit this state is facing. Thus, we need to keep the millionaire taxes going, because otherwise we will see in this state people losing jobs. The governor, like they run after PEF employees, will run after UP members, will run after everybody. In so going against the big guys, they are coming after the little guys, because they know that we are defenseless. We cannot defend ourselves. As Sherry said earlier, we are not as strong as corporates unless we unite. So therefore, we have to unite, we have to keep going on, we have to fight, we will win.
And when I graduated from college, I had a job in my field. It was relatively just above minimum wage job, and I worked one full-time job and 2 part-time jobs right up until the time that I got a union job. And at that time, I think it was $15 an hour plus health benefits, which I had a son and, you know, myself, and I had to make sure that I had some sort of health benefits, but that doesn't come with every job today. And it was getting that job that, and understanding why I was able to have decent pay and decent benefits, that it was only through people standing together that made me want to get more involved in the union movement. And I'm now serving, I think this is the end of my 2nd term as union steward. I'm vice president for our division. My union is PEF, Public Employees Federation. And thank you. You know, recently, public employees in this state, well, all over, but in this state in particular I'll talk about because I know the most about that. We've, you know, our governor came to us and he said, you know what, we need $450 million from state employees. Of course, at the same time, he was saying, I'm going to discontinue a state surcharge tax on millionaires that's going to increase the state deficit by $1 billion. So apparently he didn't need $1 billion from the millionaires, but he needed $450 million from the middle class workers in this state. And he said, hey, if you guys don't give it to us, we're going to lay off 9,800 of you. So what do? You know, you sit down with your people, with your members, you know, people, you try and sit down with the governor and you work out a contract. And I can tell you, none of us got good contracts, and pretty much everybody is taking a pay cut. And you know, that's what it is, and that's where it is. But so everybody's just kind of, you know, okay for now. What's going to happen next year? Who knows? But we know that that surcharge, that millionaire's tax, is still scheduled to expire the end of this year. Okay, well, that's going to increase the state deficit by $1 billion for this fiscal year. It's going to end up being an additional $5 billion added to the deficit the following year. So how does that relate to us? You know, us people here in the middle. Well, you know, odds are, what's the governor going to do? You know, I mean, if past experience, if past behavior is any indicator of future behavior, in all likelihood, what's he going to say? Where is he going to take it from? He's not going to go to his wealthy cronies. We kind of know that, you know. So he's going to come to us. We're going to have less services. We're probably going to have higher unemployment because people are going to get hit again. That's what it's going to come down to. And, you know, it's for us to start fighting back. And I think that that's a part of what this movement, you know, definitely signifies, is those of us in the middle, those of us who are not in the wealthiest 1% in this nation, in this world, standing up, fighting back, saying what's right is right, and, you know, enough is enough. And, you know, when I see the growth of the Occupy movement, like Rose was talking about earlier, it energizes her. I think it should energize all of us. You know, when you see the movement growing, you don't see a heck of a lot of it, you know, really on TV, because when I talk to people about it, they'll say, what are you talking about? What's this Occupy stuff? You know, and I'm like, what do you mean? You haven't heard about it? So then you start talking to people, but it's still growing, even though we haven't really, you know, had a lot of help, or maybe no help from the media. I mean, the only thing they seem to highlight is when bad things happen. But, you know, the movement is still growing, and people are getting educated, and people are wanting to, you know, wanting to get involved and engaged. So I think that's great. And I love that it stems from a place of young people too. And, you know, I've been hanging out here a lot, and I mean, what I feel like I'm learning, and I mean, I think it's great. I was a person who absolutely loved college when I was there, and I felt like, you know, I learned a lot, and I learned a lot, you know, just hanging out with these people. And I have a son who's going to college next year. I'm still paying on my own student loans, by the way, and I will be when he goes. So we'll just keep stacking it up, I guess. But you know, I hope that some of these young people, you know, I mean, I'd love to see the same thing for my kids. I mean, I love that they're engaged and they're active and they're wanting to change the world. And, you know, I mean, it's hard to not get depressed, but I don't think you can get depressed. And I think when you see this movement, it should help everybody get out of that funk and really energize, you know, all of us. But because we are the 99%, right?
The Supreme Court decision that was a few, I think 2 years ago, Citizens United versus the federal elections, that determined, our Supreme Court has determined that corporations are determined to be people having the same rights as we did. Our forefathers, when they said we the people, meant corporations? Are they crazy? I mean, this is my country. A corporation, Bank of America, does not have the same rights to freedom to speech as I do, or my children, or my parents. The Citizens United has opened up a floodgate. And if you don't believe me, look at the 2010 midterm. It was the highest amount of money that was given. They don't have to say who they are. They don't have to say how much. They could be a foreign corporation. They could be a foreign country. They could be anybody. They are buying our democracy. I am here as I think the other person said, a long term. My grandparents, my father, my brothers and sisters have fought in wars. We stand. This is our country. I'm up here fighting for my grandchildren. I say, no way. No way. Corporations, get your money out of our ballot boxes. Our democracy is not for sale. It is not for sale.
I'm a veteran. I'm the grandson of a veteran. My grandfather fought in France in World War I. My father was on a destroyer escort in the South Pacific in World War II. My daughter Allison was in the Army. She's a veteran. I was a veteran during the Vietnam War, although I didn't fight in Vietnam. I hunted for submarines, Russian submarines off the coast of the U.S. And I'm a federal employee. I work at the VA in Buffalo, so I work for the veterans. And I'm about to retire, in the next 18 days. I'm going to go on Social Security. Basically, I'm going to go into poverty. So I'm in the process of finding a job. If I can work at McDonald's, I'll be happy. I'm supposed to be talking about veterans issues. We fight, and we die, and we're maimed, and we come home with PTSD. And as a VA employee, I help the veteran, but I'm getting PTSD myself just from handling the claims of these veterans. I mean, it's amazing. And they can spend money to bomb the other countries, bomb them into oblivion. They can't spend money to take care of the veterans. Shame on them, yes, basically, shame on them.
First, I want to thank these young people for showing up.
The people, united!
I'm scared to death. My son has graduated from college. He's got a very good job. My daughter is a steel worker with 2 young children. I don't think she'll ever see that American dream of buying her own home. My son is probably $80,000 in debt. He went on to grad school. It makes you sad. It really makes you sad. I'm a proud public servant, not a public employee. We have truck drivers. We have nurses. We do jobs that people don't want to do. Working at that county home, we're taking care of the indigent. This state of New York has a law that we have to take care of the indigent. States from around the area stop their benefits for their people at 24 months or 60 months. They come over our borders. We have to take care of them. They're lining up at our welfare offices because they don't have the jobs. And it's pretty damn sad when John is a retiree looking for a job. That's why you young people can't find jobs. The seniors are out there working at McDonald's and greeting at Walmart. They should be able to retire decently. We lost our 401s. I didn't have much to begin with, but whatever I had was gone because the corporations got greedy. Bernie Madoff got greedy. So how are we going to retire? I just want to thank you all for coming, and I want to remind you we are having a rally in Mayville on the 16th, Wednesday the 16th at 5:15 to support the county home. They want to put it up for sale. If that happens and it privatizes, it does away, they don't have to keep those Medicaid beds. They don't have to keep the people that are poor that can't afford to stay in a nursing home. We're working 2 jobs, or we've got 2 people working. We can't stay home and take care of our parents. I used to go to help with my grandmother, and then my mother did a different shift. We can't do that anymore. We're all working. We have two people in our household working. We need to be able to take care of the indigent in this state, and our seniors, and our disabled, our indigent. And if they sell that county home and they do away with some of those beds, those Medicaid beds, they could be in Wyoming County, they could be in Cortland County. You're never going to see your mother or grandmother but once a month if you get out to take a ride. You can't go there every day and hold her hand and feed her. My aunt was there 6 years. My uncle at 93 was driving every day to hold her hand from noon till 5 o'clock. She didn't know who he was, but he knew who she was. And he took care of her, and that kept him going. And she was well taken care of. It's clean. The people work hard. They don't make a hell of a lot of money. There's no $60,000 retirements here. I'm probably going to retire maybe $12,000 if I can retire in another year or so. There's no big, when they average in the public employees, they're talking about the governors, the directors, the county exec, the school board superintendents. That's what they're averaging in. So please join us on Mayville if you can. Let your neighbors know to call their legislators, talk to their mayors, talk to their friends and family.
Save the county home! Save the county home! Save the county home! Save the county home!
We need to save this county home from being sold and losing another 280 jobs out of this area that we can't afford to lose.
a lot of our problems would be solved if we weren't spending these multi-billions of dollars each year in many countries of the world. A lot of our problems, it would go away, but we'd be able to pay for schools and not have students go into debt.
The average is $25,000, and to go to grad school, probably $100,000 would be how I would coming out of school. You know, students are graduating with these talents and being forced to work 3 jobs just to try to start to pay back their loans, pay their rent, pay for food, and that leaves no time for creative expression or anything like that. You have to work, so there's no time to volunteer, to spend time with your family, to paint, to draw, to do whatever you like to do because you have to work so hard just to get by. I may or may not be successful in finding a job right away, but it doesn't address the fact that a job still doesn't mean health care. A job doesn't mean that I will have a secure income for the future. And a job definitely doesn't mean that I'll be able to retire before the age 85. As long as I can remember, I too have been told, the American dream, Cody, go to college, get an education, you can do anything you want. And I think that's a lie, and I think it's wrong to keep telling people that until we make it a reality. It's time we wake people up. You know, something's wrong that after 50 years of hard work, people still have nothing. And there's something wrong when at least 1 in 6 Americans are living in poverty. According to our leaders, we're one of the wealthiest, most advanced countries in the world. So how can a country with all these resources at its fingertips deny citizens food, shelter, deny citizens health care, and deny them the ability to even try to move up in class? We need to stop blaming the poor and glorifying the rich. We need to put basic human needs and rights above of corporate and governmental leaders, and we need to realize that as human beings, it's our duty to stand up for each other, to look after each other, and most importantly, to love one another. Thank you all so much for being here.
I'm Michelle. I'm also a student at SUNY Fredonia.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. I just want to say a couple things. I'm also currently over $50,000 in debt. I'm a 4th-year genetics major on campus. I may get a job, possibly, but like Cody had said before, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to get over the debt that I'm in. Now, when they said that we would have the right to life, I'm sure they didn't mean that war was a right to life, or that poisoning our air and our water and our land was a right to life, or that by being thousands of dollars in debt in order to survive or to be educated even would be a right to liberty. And I'm sure that by pursuit of happiness, they knew that happiness was just simply an emotion that you know, emotional response from your environment. What they may have meant to say is that we have the pursuit of inner peace. Currently, we are limited in our communication, that there's more that we wish to talk about, you know? And this is more than just a revolution, it's an evolution towards bringing all of us collectively to perceive our surroundings and be a part of our surroundings, which is the earth that we live on. I'm a biology major on campus, and as much as I am a scientist, I am a spiritualist as well. And so as much as I believe in the creative force and this loving energy of the universe, I do understand there is a level of evolution in reality. And as time has shown, we have evolved from an amoeba to fish to bears to monkeys to humans. We've gone through this evolution, all driven by our desire to perceive our surroundings. And right now, you are my surroundings. And that is why we've developed the level of communication that we have now, is so that I can communicate with you to understand you as my surroundings.
My name's Dave Wilkinson, and I'm the IBEW representative in Jamestown. I'm the union rep for all the electricians in the area. I spend a lot of time talking about unions up here. All the progressive, and I'm going to call you the college people, freedom thinkers, all of our good ideas and all the shove that America's had in the last 30 years have come from our college campuses. They came from when we marched with Dr. King. They came when we supported Bobby Kennedy. They came when we sat in a protest of the Vietnam War. It also came at Kent State, things that I grew up in my lifetime. So I'm telling you college students, you cannot quit. You have to take your country back. You are the ones that have the ability to do that. I, as a labor leader, you know, my day in the sun is probably fading fast, but the progressive thinking that comes out of your campus, out of what you're doing right now, is what's going to shove this country forward. It's always been about progressive thinking, progressive college thinking. The labor movement will support everything that you want to do. I give you my word, because I will never quit. And the last thing I will have to say is, it's not always about what we have, but it's going to be about how we live. And your drive will get us there.
I'm so glad that he just came up here and said all that, because I'd like to respond. I am a student of many things. I happen to be a student at the college, but I'd like to think that I'll be a student until I'm old and gray. I'd like to read a poem that I picked up in Hilo, which is where my dad lives, and it's just titled $. The politics crushes the arts. The politics sculpt the science. The politics inhabit the religion, broker the brain, the breath, the blood. And it's not all talk. The talk is the screen, the cover, the smoke to hide the tentacles of the rapacious capitalism we love, have assimilated its rules and come to defend, to believe as the point of national pride. Victory is the only agenda. This is tough stuff, hard bends, only a force to stop at nothing. To win, to win, to win. The opposite is suspect, horrid, slimy, cold, inert. To lose is the original sin in political theology. You know the God here, signified not by the sign of the cross, but by rubbing the thumb and forefinger together. Capiche? And I'd just like to say, in response to Dave, in response to what Dave was saying, based on discussions that I've recently had in class, because I do like to discuss, the reason that there are not more students here is that they're afraid, and they're afraid because of the corporate-driven media that being a part of the 99% is going to go against their fundamental ideals. Whether they be totally left-wing or totally right-wing, all of a sudden we have this 53% that is a conservative movement that isn't counter to anything going on here. This movement is so that everybody can speak, no matter what your own personal agenda is, and more than that, it's to listen. And that's what I've been doing for the past, I don't know, every time I've stopped by here, because I realize that I'm a student, and what's going to be important in the future is my reasoning. What's important now is what's happening to everybody who comes up here and speaks. And that's what I want to know about. And I wish that there were 5,000 students here with me, but they won't do that because that puts them under a stigma that's totally false. That's just driven by this divide in this country that comes from which channel you watch on TV. That comes from what's on in your own home. We can't get primary sources. We can't get objective fact anymore. This is the only forum where that happens. So that's why nobody else is here, and I wish there were more people.
You know what? We might not be feeling it now. We might not know how we're not part of the 99% now. But the first sign I made when I first walked up here said, "There but for the grace of God." Because the thing that's pissed me off the most when people take away health care, take away public assistance programs, is that, gosh darn it, every single one of us can be at the bottom of that bucket in 2 seconds flat. Illnesses, accidents, somebody working us over with a job, we can all be in that position quicker than a blink of an eye. And it ticks me off when people don't understand that. And the people that are already there, the possibility that we could all be there in a millisecond, that's why I'm here. That's why I love this movement. And that's why I hope we keep fighting until we got that change.
I'm glad to see everybody here today. I want to thank all the brothers and sisters from the union movement for showing up. I just noticed the mayor of Fredonia is here also. Morning, Steve. I'm going to read to you a letter I received the other day from the National AFL-CIO, and it was sent out by AFL-CIO President Richard Trumka. Occupy Wall Street has captured the imagination and passion of millions of Americans who have lost hope that our nation's policymakers are speaking for them. We support the protesters in their determination to hold Wall Street accountable and create good jobs.
We the people. That's how it starts, right? The Constitution, the founding of our country. We the people, in order to form a more perfect union. And what has happened since then? What's happened over the last couple hundred years of our country? Over 280 cases came before the Supreme Court to give the rights of people to corporations. So they have the rights of a person, but they don't have the morality of a person. They don't have the ethics of a person. And in 2010, this went even further, right? With the Citizens United with the FEC came before the Supreme Court. And in part because of the precedent, the Supreme Court, in a very narrow vote, favored the FEC and gave the rights to corporations to give whatever money they want, unlimited money, to our politicians. I can't compete with Walmart. Financially, none of us can compete. Of the top 100 economies in the world, 52 of them are corporations. How in the hell are any one of us going to compete with that? Financially. So since the Constitution, what has happened is that we the people has become we the corporation. We the corporations of the world. And because they don't have the morality, because they don't have the ethics, because by law they're required to think about the profits at the end of the quarter. By law, that's what they have to think about, right? So then the profits come over the people, and we see the results of that, especially here, okay, in the Northeast, their industrial past. Tonawanda Coke, anybody listen to NPR, All Things Considered, a couple days ago, right? I played it in my class to show the importance of what one person can do, and I do think it does exemplify that, but it also shows what corporations can do. So if you don't know the story, it's actually an alum from SUNY Fredonia who was working. She was working as a pharmaceutical sales rep, and she came down with fibromyalgia, which is a disease that essentially just makes you perpetually think that you're hurting. They don't know what causes it, but it's very real. It's very, very real, and as a result, she had to quit her job. And she got thinking, she started talking to her neighbors, and realizing that in Tonawanda there was a pretty big precedent. A lot of people who had very unusual types of cancer. And she started thinking, does this have something to do with that smell that's always in the air? And so she started back in grad school at the University of Buffalo and got involved with one of my colleagues and started a bucket campaign. She started going to her neighbors and saying, hey, will you clip this on? And just as you go through your day, just have this clipped on, this little badge. Okay? And they sent them off. And then it went from these badges to getting these buckets, homemade buckets, okay, to sample the air, to do what the EPA and the DEC was not doing, which is sad. But they're not doing it because, well, we keep cutting their funding, right? Because the corporations don't want us doing it. So they started this bucket campaign in 2004. 2009, they finally got the DEC to admit, okay, to start doing their own sampling and to come out and to admit that Tonawanda Coke, who had for years been reporting that they were releasing somewhere between 3 and 5 tons of benzene a year, were in fact releasing 91 tons of a known carcinogen. That's what we know that they released in 2010. That's what we know they released in 1 year. And they had been releasing this easily over a period of 20 or 30 years, especially if you talk to ex-employees. That's what happens with corporations taking over our government. They don't care about the people with the cancer who are living there. They don't care about the people with the cancer who are working there. What they care about is the shareholders and the record profits that they made in that quarter. This is one case, it's one very pertinent case to us, but it's certainly not an isolated case. There are rivers in India that run different colors depending upon the time of day, because of the pollution that's being released. Red in the morning, blue in the afternoon. That's sick. That's sick. Okay, this is example after example. I mean, they're everywhere. There are so many of them, and it's not an anomaly that these things happen in poorer communities. There's been studies. Places will intentionally build the most toxic corporations in repressed communities because the people need the jobs so badly that they will take knowing that they're getting a paycheck today, even if it means that 20 years from now they're going to have cancer, because they need to eat today. This is what they do. They intentionally move in. We have an example actually right in our neighborhood in Pennsylvania. It's a facility that wants to burn tires to make electricity. Do we have anybody here from the power plant? Our power plant is working at 1/4 of what it possibly can be doing because we don't need the electricity. They just got approval to build a facility in Pennsylvania to burn tires, which for the record is about 1,000 times worse than burning coal, and we all know that burning coal isn't good. But they're going to burn tires to produce electricity that we don't need. We don't need it. But they're doing it. And the fact that the people don't want it doesn't matter, because they filled out their paperwork correctly, because they have money going to the right people, honestly, is what it comes down to. This is what happens when corporations are running our country. They're not thinking about us. We have lost we the people. And this movement is about taking that back. They may have more money than us, but we have more people than they do.
These are Naomi Klein, author and writer, journalist, speaking to Occupy Wall Street on October 7th, 2011. This is a great struggle. Here are some things that do not matter.
Whether we shake our fists or make peace signs.
Whether we shake our fists or make peace signs.
Whether we can fit our dreams for a better world into a media soundbite. Here are some things that do matter. Our courage, our moral compass, and how we treat each other. We have picked a fight with the most powerful economic and political forces on the planet, and that is frightening. As this movement grows from strength to strength, it will get more frightening. Always be aware that there will be a temptation to shift to smaller targets, but this time, let's treat each other as if we plan to work beside each other in a struggle for many, many years to come, because the task before us will demand nothing less. Let's treat this beautiful moment as if it is the most beautiful thing in the world, because it is, because it really is.
Stand up and shout! Stand up and shout! We are the 99%! We are the 99%! We are